everyone, happy Friday. Today I wanted to make a video about the history of the Senate filibuster rule. Republican Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, have been speaking out against their support of reforming or eliminating the filibuster, citing bogus facts that it is part of the design of the institution and it therefore cannot function reasonably without it, that it's important in order to prevent the majority party from implementing broad, sweeping federal policy changes and the like. And I want to dispel those misconceptions and also just give you the facts, the history of how we got this filibuster rule in the first place. A lot of the information I'm going to be giving you today comes from an article from Sarah A. Binder, who's a senior fellow of government studies at the Brookings Institute, which is a conservative think tank, just keep that in mind, as well as a book called Kill Switch, which really details the history of how the Senate was formed, how it's functioned throughout time, how it's been reformed, as well as the anti-democratic nature that it has. I urge you to check out both resources. They'll be linked down below. Let's get into it. Senate was never designed to have a filibuster. Joe Manchin has said things like this for weeks and months, but it simply isn't true. When the Senate was first created, there was no sort of filibuster that would stop the body from ending debate and moving to a vote. They could just at any time decide to end debate and move to a vote. Now, this wasn't really happening in the House and the Senate because they didn't function in quite the way that they do now. These were new bodies, this was a new legislative branch, and this was a new government and country. So they were still kind of figuring things out. As such, they had a lot of complicated rules and procedures. And Aaron Burr, who was vice president from 1801 to 1805, and thus was president of the Senate, since that's part of the vice president's job. And also keep in mind, this was a much more active role back then. Now we don't really see the vice president acting as the president of the Senate, actually presiding over procedure, unless it's a tie-breaking vote or unless they're swearing in new members of the Senate. But it was a much more active role at this time. And in his final speech, I believe, that he gave in his presiding over the Senate, he gave them advice and said that a lot of their rules were overcomplicated, they were redundant, they were unnecessarily complex, and that they should consider paring things down so that they could actually better function, ironically, as a governing body. And he actually quoted sections of text that he thought should be eliminated in order for this to happen. And part of that text included the ability to end debate with a simple majority rule and call for a vote. Now, at the time, they didn't even really read or unpack or understand the implications of taking out this text. They simply respected the views of Aaron Burr, thought that he was correct in his analysis, and basically just eliminated the parts of the rule book that they told him to. It was never something that was deliberate or intentional to implement a filibuster. I won't get into the other complications about a talking filibuster versus a non-talking filibuster, I suppose. It wasn't even until about 30 years later that an actual filibuster was implemented. The conditions had been set to allow a filibuster to happen, eliminating the ability to just end debate with a majority vote, but wasn't until 1837 that that first actually happened. And however, this still wasn't really a big problem because partisanship wasn't rampant in Washington. Many years where a lot wasn't really happening because of the Civil War and the issues that were taking place outside of Washington in these individual states and between the states versus federally. There also just wasn't as much hostility between colleagues in the same way. And so it wasn't really a big problem until after the Civil War in the Reconstruction era that this first started to rear its ugly head. And both parties really wanted a reform. It was clear that the filibuster was problematic and it was stopping legislative action from being able to take place. But it wasn't until World War I in 1917 when then President Woodrow Wilson wanted to arm merchant ships as a matter of national security, and the Republicans opposed it. Because of a lot of different factors, it was sort of the moment where they could actually implement a reform of the filibuster rule. And essentially, the Democrats wanted to have it go back to being a simple majority vote in cloture to end debate and then bring the bill or the issue at hand, bringing that issue to a vote. And the Democrats supported implementing a cloture rule that would bring things back to what they used to be before 1805, where a simple majority vote could then bring about an end to debate and a vote. The Republicans opposed this and wanted to implement a supermajority, so requiring 2/3 of the Senate to vote to end debate and bring the Senate to a vote, or to call a vote. And basically, they ended up compromising, going from 51 and 66 in the middle to 60, although that's still much more on the minority side, since that's not a number that's in between those two. It's much closer to the 66 number, but nevertheless, that was the agreement they came to, and that was the cloture rule that was adopted, Rule 22, that is still in place 105 years later. So that's where we are. We need 60 votes in order to end debate and call a vote in the Senate. So everything that you've basically heard about the filibuster is wrong. It wasn't something that was part of the original constitutional framework of the Senate or its rule book or its functioning. It wasn't something that was implemented in order to give a voice to the minority party, and actually was reformed in bringing about the cloture rule in 1917 in a way that happened because of the minority party wanting to stop actual groundbreaking reform from taking place. They wanted to keep things from being able to happen in a much more direct way by having supermajorities. That's what happened. And it allows the minority party to often obstruct legislation and to just hold more power than they should, quite frankly, than they've been elected to. Our governing bodies are supposed to be by and for the people. They're supposed to represent the will of the people. And clearly, they do not. And clearly, holding these kinds of rules that give the minority party so much power, and particularly the power of obstruction, stops the democratic process from being able to take place. So hopefully this explanation gives you something to chew on. I hope you'll also check out both the article and the book down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.